Nikki was born in prison while her own mother was doing time for drug possession. Nikki was raised by her own grandmother, who had a tough time keeping her on the straight and narrow. At only 17 years old, Nikki ended up pregnant with twins, naming the girls Tasmia and Jasmia Whitehead, known as Taz and Jazz. For 12 years, they all lived with Nikki's grandmother, the girl's great-grandmother. But Nikki dreamed of giving her daughters a better life. So Nikki and the twins moved about 20 miles away to Conyers, Georgia. The young mom made sure that her girls had the advantages that she didn't have, putting them in dance classes and music classes. Damn, that sounds like a dope mom. The girls were straight A students with hopes of one day going to Harvard. Can you imagine? Now, the girls were getting a little bit older, so Nikki was losing control and the girls resented their own mother. Nikki, on this one night, had called 911 when she discovered that Jazz had snuck out in the middle of the night to go see her own boyfriend. Her mom didn't know about it. That one night, there was a huge blowout and the police showed up. The twins told the officer that they didn't want to live with their mom anymore. The officer said that they seemed sweet, but she had a bad feeling. After talking with Nikki, who looked scared, the officer realized that she was fearful of her own kids and that they were working together. They were in cahoots. So the officer felt that things had calmed down, but also had a gut feeling when she left that something would probably happen. So she stayed close by for a bit. Sure enough, Officer Scruggs hears screaming from the house 3 to 4 minutes later. Both girls had jumped on Nikki and started beating her up. Nikki manages to get away and calls 911 again. Officer Scruggs heads back to the house and Nikki runs out of the house with a cordless phone, crying, screaming, absolutely terrified. Nikki told the officer that they had started attacking her from the moment that she left. Now the twins, however, said that once they went back in the house after the police left, that their mother became abusive with them, told them that they were not going anywhere and that she started to beat on them. Now that sounds like a common case of she said, she said. Officer Scruggs said based on the physical evidence, Nikki was clearly the victim. Nikki had scratches on her neck, scratches on her chest, and she was hysterical. You could have been two strangers and there would have been more emotion shown. They are arrested and charged for the altercation and the judge orders them all to go to counseling. So fast forward to that fateful night. Taz and Jazz, at the ages of 16, had flagged down a police car and told them that they came home from school that day to find that their mother had been fatally wounded. Police said that the girls were so distraught by their mother's death and the crime scene. At first they suspected the twins' father, but he had been living in Canada at the time of the altercation, so obviously it couldn't have been him. The twins had told the police that Nikki's boyfriend had caught Nikki on the phone with another boyfriend, so could it have been him? But police started to suspect something though when there had been no force of entry, which basically means one of two things. Either one, the person that did it, they probably lived there, or they could have been invited in. Now, with them being invited in, it could be the current boyfriend, but he had a good alibi, so it probably wasn't him. So Conyers Police Captain Jackie Dunn said, one of the twins that we observed in the back of the ambulance, we saw her bite her own arm. This is what Dunn said. And he even said, we stopped her and asked her, hey, what are you doing? And she explained that she does that when she gets upset. Who does that? Who bites their own arm when they're upset? Detective Ken Swift said that these two girls were hugging each other in each other's arms, and when I said, what can I do to make this easier for you? They turned and looked at me and said, can we watch CSI? Who wants to watch CSI after witnessing something like that? I mean, that's just bonkers. That's craziness. Essentially, it was right then that it was like, okay, there's something very, very off about this. So the police also found out that the girls had a history of violence with their mother, and handwritten letters by the girls how they actually wanted their mom gone. Police find clumps of hair ripped out of Nikki's head, and then they also found Nikki's DNA from the crime scene all over her boots. The girls also had told the police that they walked to school that day, but there was a gas station and they had a camera and it showed that they didn't walk at all. They actually just hitched a ride from a stranger. So the police were catching them in the lies. And here's the thing, guys. Nikki left behind one crucial piece of evidence. This is the thing that just cracks the case. Nikki left behind a bite mark on her daughter's arm. Remember that bite mark that I told you about? The one where the daughter was biting herself on the way to the hospital? After examination, they matched up that bite mark to Nikki's. It turns out that Nikki bit one of her daughters in self-defense during the altercation. And then on the way to the hospital, one of Nikki's daughters was biting her arm just to try to cover it up. Now that bite mark proved that it linked the girls to the crime. So the girls also had injuries on their bodies that seemed to be the result of the struggle. And when asked about the marks, the girls claimed that they had gotten into a fight with each other. The police decided to separate the girls to see if the stories would remain consistent. And as further proof to their potential involvement in this crime, their stories weren't consistent with each other's or the initial story that they told police. So the twins finally confessed to taking out their own mother. They said that they had been provoked and they normally had fights with their own mother. However, this one goes on for far too long. They didn't want to go to school and got in a heated argument with Nikki. But then the mom, Nikki, hits Jazz with a pot. And then Jazz takes the pot from her own mom, and so Nikki then grabs a steak knife. Oh boy. There was name calling and cursing and scratching, but then it all led up to them fatally wounding her to the point where there was no coming back. They wounded her up to 80 times. Like, that is insane. 80 times. Not 60, not 70, 80 times. They then went to school so they could have a solid alibi. Detectives then found a journal in their home with a premeditated plan to take out their own mother. The mess then led through the home and even outside, suggesting Nikki managed to get away before the twins dragged their own mother back into the house to finish off the rest of the job. She made it to the neighbors. She rang the doorbell and screamed for help. But the neighbors heard and was in bed at the time, so he didn't get up to go investigate what was going on. The girls then smashed their mom over the head with a pot, and they inflicted more wounds with that kitchen knife, and they just cut off oxygen with a ribbon from a medal that the girls had won, with probably the mother's help. They put her in the tub to leave her to just pass away in the water. She told her own daughters, "Kill me now or I'll kill you." She went on under a few minutes until she finally passed away. Apparently, when looking further into the family's history, there had been years of violent turmoil. Hold on, let me start the pie. So the girls had been living with their great-grandmother, but then went back to living with their mom the week prior. They had lived with their great-grandmother for 1.5 years after an altercation where they physically assaulted their mom. Friends of Nikki's say they aren't surprised her daughters took her out. They were once honor students and Girl Scouts. As they had gotten older, they got really difficult to handle. They wanted to do what they wanted to do. I mean, what teenager doesn't? With that, their great-grandmother, who was 80 at the time, they could do whatever they wanted. They apparently stole money, and at some point the great-grandmother was like, "I have to get a deadbolt to my room." They say Nikki wanted to fight for those girls and start over with them. So the girls were found guilty. It turns out that they got 40 years in prison. And since then, Jazz actually graduated high school. And her great-grandmother, Nikki's grandmother, is so proud of Jazz for graduating high school and showed up to her graduation. Now, by the way, guys, I want you to know something. Forensic psychologists, they say that only 2% of crimes of this nature are actually where the kids will take out their parents. So I don't want you thinking that this is gonna happen to you, because out of that 2%, only 15% are daughters that take out their own parents, because this is extremely rare. It is quite common when daughters take out their own parents to see wounds in the 70s or even 80s. It's because that they're acting out of rage. So with all of that, I think what makes this case so crazy is that if it wasn't for Nikki's bite mark, the girls might have gotten away with it. So with that, I think the moral of the story is that anyone can be a suspect. Stay watchful, friends.